to the integration channels. We will start with the ECP endpoint, where the three integration channels are available. It's MQP, web service, and FSSF. Information about integration channels is described in the ECP public interface guide. So let's quickly take a look into the guide. Okay, there is some okay, this model API is not what I wanted. Okay, logical description. In the ECP public interface guide and in the edX user guide are described to the detail all the integration channels. So before you will start with some integration, it is good to read first these chapters about the integration. For instance, you can find there which are the input parameters. Some are mandatory, some are optional. So you can see for instance, the payload of the message is always needed. So you can send an empty message. Then there is some conversation ID, which is optional. Receiver code, of course, required. So you need to define to which endpoint you want to send message. Business type is also the mandatory, and then there are some configuration parameters or parameter of the message which are again optional, which is like business application message ID, sender application ID, and okay, this content is required. Okay, so this is just a brief introduction of the interfaces. Let's start with the IMQP interface, which is described in this messaging API. The messaging API for IMQP has two operations. First one is for sending the messages. And the second one is for the receiving messages. Again, there are described which parameters are required and so on, and details which parameter are how the parameters are named. But I don't want to go to the detail. Everything is described in this guide, so you just need to know where the information is available, and maybe we can try to send some message via this MQP API. So we have a tool which can be used for the sending messages to the MQP API. We are using the MQPS format, so communication is secured. So we need to define username and password, and also location to the key store and password to the key store, together with key alias, which is used for the communication. This is the default one for the ECP endpoint. So we are using ECP module out. Then, of course, we need to define URL of the internal broker. By default, the broker port is 5672, but for this Docker environment, we have mapped the ports to different ones. So this is the reason why we are sending it to port 20212. We need to define the Merlin, the receiver, which is Merlin in this case. We need to define the message type, which is MQP ECP in this time, and these parameters are optional, like business application ID, business application and correlation ID. So I'll omit this one. Let's take a look how the configuration actually look like for the ECP and EDX components. We are using the runtime configuration.
Yeah, I will just answer a question from Bostian. Is this test MQP client you are showing already available for TSOs? not. It's still used only for internal testing purposes.
Yeah, it's like testing tool for medical developers. Okay, what I wanted to do. Yeah, I wanted to show you the configuration. Okay. So we are using the runtime configuration for configuration of the integration, but you can use also the main configuration file, the ECP.properties, if you want, if you prefer. So it is on your preference. And for enabling the ENTSO-E integration, you need to firstly enable the API. Then you need to define the queues which are used for the messages. So for instance, you can see for the ENTSO-E ECP type, all the messages are stored to ECP endpoint inbox ENTSO-E queue. That there is different queue, which is ECP endpoint inbox, which is a default queue, which is used for, let's say, forwarding these messages which are defined there to the EDX toolbox. For us, it's important this one, like we have defined ENTSO-E ECP type will be sent to this queue ECP endpoint inbox ENTSO-E. So maybe we can try to send a message to Marilyn endpoint. So let's try it. Send, message was sent. Let's open the help tile of the Marilyn. To take a look whether the message arrived there. Okay, and you can see the message is really there. It is in the queue, which is called ECP endpoint.inbox ENTSO-E. And now let's try to download it from another business application. So I will use different instance. So this is for the Marilyn, I believe. No, this is toolbox. Sorry. So this one, third, yeah. Third one, okay. This is for the Marilyn endpoint. You can see there is again the key store and so on for the Marilyn. Username, password, alias, URL of the broker. And we know that this business application should consume messages from this inbox ENTSO-E queue. So let's try if there is some message received. Okay, and you can see that the message was downloaded. The content is test. We will try one. Okay, we should see that the message was the queue from there, so it's not there anymore. And we should be able, when we will trigger it at this again, there is no message to be consumed. Okay. So this is ENTSO-E. Of course, you can use also the ENTSO-E for sending messages to different channels. Like you can send a message from the ENTSO-E to FSSF or to web service. It depends on the message type configuration on the receiver side. So for instance, we can try to send a message to the should be it could be like this.
Yeah.
Again to Marilyn, sent, message was sent, and now this message should be available for the load from the web service. Yeah, we can see it's there, and the status is delivered. So it was not processed yet via the web service application, or it can be downloaded manually from the GUI. So I can show you when I click there, downloaded the file, and content should be test. And it's there, content is there, and the status was changed to the received. So this is the MQB for ECP endpoint. Now let's move on the web service API. Again, it is described in the log interface guide. Okay. In chapter 6, web services, you can see there is defined the URL which should be used for the gathering the data from the ECP endpoint. And this URL is then used by your business application to get the description of the web services and the operations which are available on by the API. There is several methods like for sending messages, for receiving messages, for confirmation of the received message because it is not implicit in the web service. You need to confirm a received message to change the status from delivered to received. You can check the message status. You can do the connectivity test to other components. I think that's all. So let's take a look on the UI, which is application which can be used for sending the messages via the web service. So I will try to send a message from Nemo endpoint to Marilyn Marilyn endpoint. As you can see, I have already defined the security header there, which contain credentials in case that the endpoint is secured by user and the password. Okay, I need to define the code of the receiver. So it is Marilyn. Business type could be like web service, ECP. Center application. It is optional, but I will fill it. So API, message ID, whatever, optional again, and conversation ID. This is optional, but I can also try to send it with this conversation ID. This should be unique, always unique. So if we will try to send the message with the same conversation ID, it will fail. Okay, let's attach some testing file to the message.
I have one question, Miguel Escribano from Red Eléctrica. Related to that SOAP envelope, is there an XML schema for that available, or how to build with an example in order to use and to do our own SOAP envelope to take it like more suitable for us? Is there available any, let me say, example in the documentation or how to obtain an XML schema for that?
Of course, it is available on this VSWL URL, the definition of the service. So I can quickly open it in the browser. And yeah, in the browser, I think this is what you mentioned. Okay, this is the definition, like for all the operations, and so you can use this one.
Okay, okay, thank you.
Okay, so I've prepared a message for the Maryland. Let's try to send it. Okay, we have some response. The identifier, so let's check what happened. What is the status of the message? So this is done via the check message status operation. I need to fill in the message ID. Okay, and you can see that the message is waiting in the delivered status. We should be also able to see the message on the GUI of the email. So messages, outbox, yeah, and you can see that there is one message which was sent to the Maryland, which is waiting to be delivered. Okay, let's pick it from the Maryland via the web service API.
One question related to the methods that are exposed for the web services. All of them are for retrieving, sending, and is there any one for authentication?
No.
Okay.
You need to add this security header to the request, but there is no, like, if you mean some web service which will verify you do the authentication, then there is no service for this. But you can use some basic tests like the connectivity test, and you will verify the authentication and the connectivity to other endpoint by the one shell. But there is no like single operation just to verify the credentials.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So let's try to receive the message. So business type was ECP. Yes, is it correct? I hope so.
Not WS-ECP.
Always, vice versa. Okay, and so I need to define what business type should be downloaded from the queue on the receiver side, and whether I want to download content or not. So let's try to invoke it. Okay, and the content was downloaded. You can see that some response was returned, like with the message ID. There is information about the metadata, sender application, the message ID, and there is also in the attachment, there is the content of the file. So working as expected. However, if I will check the connectivity, the message status on the receiver side or on the sender side, I can see it is still delivered, you see. So there on the receiver side, we have downloaded the content using this receive message operation. And as I mentioned previously, it is not implicit that the status received is automatically set on the message which is downloaded. So I need to do it manually, let's say. So I know the message ID. So I will copy it. And I need to invoke this confirm receive message operation, okay? I will fill in the message ID. Submit. Okay, I have confirmed. And now let's check the status on the sender side, for instance. Yeah, and you can see the status changed to the receive. The same is visible also in the GUI. Yep, received. So this is the web service API. Now the next integration channel which we can test for the ECP endpoint is the FSSF channel, which is the file system channel. It stands for file system shared folder, and it allows you to upload and download the messages using the file system. Firstly, I want to mention that you need to follow the FSSF naming convention. So for instance, when you are sending the message, you need to set up the sender application, receiver type, and the message ID, or some are optional, like it's mentioned in this table, like this, some are optional. And when you want to avoid it or miss some parameter, for instance, the sender application, you will just delete it from the name and you will keep just this underscore. But you definitely need to define the receiver and the type of the message. These are mandatory for the FSSF. Regarding the configuration of the in the ECP property file, this is done via this ECP endpoint FSSF parameters. So you see that it needs to be enabled. Then you define the directory for errors, like in the case something goes wrong. Then you define the outgoing directory where to put files which should be sent out. But then when in the log directory, you have information about processing of the message. You can define whether you want to use single log per day for FSSF channel or not. And of course, you can define also directories for incoming files. You can define multiple directories per message types, or you can use asterisk instead, like this. I'll keep it as it is. So you can see that in our example, we are using the FSSF minus ECP type for receiving messages. So let's try to send some message. So I will go to the FSSF of the Nemo endpoint. I have some examples prepared there. Okay. There is some. Okay, I can. I find this one. Okay, and we can, for instance, delete this Nemo, which is optional, which is ID of the business application from sender. This is EDX, should be ECP. FSSF EDX, right? Okay. Change it to ECP. Okay, so I've prepared some file with some content. And let's try to put it to the out folder. Okay, and it's gone, seems it was processed. So let's check on the graphical user interface. You can see that it was sent to the Maryland and the state is received. As we use this FSSF ECP type, it should be received on the file system interface of the Maryland, because there is configured that this message type should be stored to the folder. So let's take a look on it. Should be Maryland endpoint, inbox. Yeah, okay, it's there. And you can see that the name file was a bit changed. Like you can see there is code on the sender, and there's also message ID of the message. It is in line with the documentation, so we are using this FSSF format. Again, I can check the content. It should be the same as sent previously. Okay, so this was FSSF. And I think we can continue with the ETX interfaces.